And we are off to our second Siebel Hub webinar. The first was on Siebel in the Cloud in April, and in May our topic is Siebel OpenUI, Art of the Possible. So let me share my screen. Okay, and there we go. So yeah, a credit goes for the background picture, goes to Endo IT, who delivered a great presentation in the last Siebel Friday, and one Siebel Friday before that with the UX transformation they did for A1. And this is partially, it has been inspiration to do this webinar, but I wanted to do this for a long time. Let me introduce myself. I'm Alexander Hansal, and I'm doing Siebel since 2001. To cut it short, I'm a writer. I love to share knowledge about Siebel and other things. I'm developer of the Siebel OpenUI training courses that you can do on the Siebel Hub. And I also provide free code samples on GitHub, among other things. So yeah, the first thing I would like to ask you is to follow a link, and I'll copy that link into the chat. Okay, so in the chat you have now a link to the poll I started for this topic back a few weeks ago. The question is, what is your level of OpenUI or UX customization for your Siebel CRM deployment or deployments that you're working on if you're an Oracle partner? And there have been currently 33 votes, and at the end of this webinar, I will refresh the page and we'll see how the votes came in. So please follow the link and make your click. So currently, the interesting numbers are that only very few projects out of those 33 votes, that is of course not very representative, out of those 33, only 6% run on vanilla Siebel OpenUI. So they use Siebel OpenUI without any additives. And another 15% have the evolutionary step of a dash of custom CSS, so custom logo, custom colors, make it look like old Siebel maybe. And 30% got serious with JavaScript. And if you work with OpenUI, then you sure know the acronyms PR, PM, PW, PL. Maybe PW is not that easy, or PL. If anybody knows these acronyms, put them in the chat and show your prowess of OpenUI. And if you don't know these acronyms, don't worry. And then the surprising thing here is that the majority, well, not the majority, but the highest number in percent, 36%, have gone all in on a UX redesign journey using JavaScript frameworks such as React or Vue. If you use any of these frameworks, please put them in the chat so we can see what's the favorite framework. Is it React? Is it Vue? Is it Mithril? Is it Shoelace? Yeah, there are plenty of them. And 12% say, okay, OpenUI is too outdated for us. We just create a fancy custom app with whatever technology and use the Siebel REST API to get the data. And of course, this is state of the art and art of the possible as well. But to be honest, that has nothing to do with OpenUI anymore, but it's an option. Okay, so please cast your votes on the poll. The link is out there in the chat as we go about, and we will talk about OpenUI, and you might not be familiar with OpenUI. You might not be confident with OpenUI. The good news is Siebel Hub Learning Experience has got you covered with 2 classes, OpenUI Basics, OpenUI Professional by yours truly. And these are available as video training or live training. And stay tuned until the end, or if you watch the replay, fast forward to the end, because there is a special promotion code to get this training much more with much less financial effort. And a reminder here, Oracle has extended the Premier support for another year as has been expected, and now Premier support for Siebel is until through at least, as Oracle says, December 2034. And well, that's more than 11 years away, and Oracle promises to think about extending that for 1 year every year. And if you haven't seen it already, the statement of directions for Siebel CRM has also been updated. It's available on Oracle support, so make sure to check it out and learn about what the plans are for the future updates on Siebel CRM. All right, so enough with the formalities. Let's get cracking with the history of Siebel OpenUI. One of the reasons I do this webinar is that the first launch was in December 2012. So that is more than 10 years ago. And more than 10 years ago, I started diving in OpenUI. I was fascinated. I bought a jQuery book over Christmas and consumed it. And so it's almost 10 years that OpenUI has arrived in Siebel projects around the world. So this 10-year anniversary we're celebrating. And let's start off with a glimpse into the past, a blast from the past. This is not OpenUI. Some people wish it would be. This is high interactivity. So maybe hands up in the chat. Who has used high interactivity before? That would be great to see some hands in the chat. And this was the pinnacle of web design and web UX in 7.0 to IP15. So for 14 plus years, this was for many projects the only available option because it was dependent on Internet Explorer, and Internet Explorer was the only browser, and so forth. Of course, then came the era of browser independence. You couldn't just use Internet Explorer. It became stale and unsecure pretty soon, and now it's obsolete even. So Oracle and many other vendors, not only Oracle, had to do something about the dependency on ActiveX and Internet Explorer, and Oracle created what is now known as OpenUI. So maybe you have never seen that early version that occurred first in the first patch to 8.1.1, and then until IP13 it was available, and already had the full browser independence. It could run in any browser. But with IP14, Oracle, well, redesigned and recreated OpenUI with the now well-known Aurora theme. We'll talk about other themes. So OpenUI is fully supporting web standards such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And with the modern browsers, of course, you can write modern day JavaScript, modern CSS, modern HTML, and you could enhance Siebel with that. So any device, any browser, and of course, that's the tagline of OpenUI. Yeah, let's not forget Smartphone UX, the latest addition to standard OpenUI in 20.9. Okay, a little bit about standard Siebel with OpenUI. For those 6% in the poll that use standard Siebel, it could look like this, depending on your device or your version or your theme that you choose. So of course there's Aurora, which supports 3 navigation types, Synergy, later came Sky Blue, there's another one, Vanilla, I think, that looks the same, different colors. Mobile applications were first designed for tablet-sized devices, and they have a slightly different look and feel. There's even an own theme for tablet-sized devices, and we have the smartphone UX. So this is all standard vanilla themes, but I want to talk about the art of the possible here in this webinar. So let's have an open discussion. It's called OpenUI after all. So Siebel OpenUI, as we have it, even if you're in 23.5, just updated because it became available last week. Siebel OpenUI is 10 or more years old. If you consider IP14, well, you could say it's 9 years, but it's a lot of time in terms of web design and web frontends. So there is a certain, let's call it lack of innovation or lack of design, and that causes a dated look and feel. Dated is the word most people use, if they're friendly enough, for Siebel OpenUI. I have recently delivered a training for a customer, and they upgraded from IP13 to Siebel 22, and they came from high interactivity, and they say, well, it's like a step back. It looks so dated. Okay, we have to take that into account, even if it's just, let's say, an opinion. But that's the feeling people have. And customers or users require modern UX. Well, define modern UX. It changes, of course. It's kind of fashionable. And that puts pressure on the Siebel developers. And that's what this webinar is all about. How can a Siebel developer, well, get trained and skill up to, well, withstand that pressure and deliver something that is really useful? Because if you're not really skilled up, if you just attempt with your, let's say, eScript skills or maybe browser script skills to attempt some customization, this would most likely, at least the first attempts, will likely result in technical debt and subsequently high cost of maintenance. And you have to maybe scratch it and rewrite everything again. So many companies, organizations reached out to partners and system integrators. And of course, they have become very good over the past 10 years on high quality, but also high cost UX redesign. Of course, if there's a lot of people involved, you're easily entering the 6-digit range for any sizable project or even more. So you have to resort either to risk high technical debt with unskilled developers, or you have to pay a lot of money to get the best UX design you can get for money. But what about Oracle? Oracle customers feel a little bit left behind. And so what can Oracle customers do to overcome that feeling of left behind, that dated look and feel? And that is understanding OpenUI and then, of course, mastering the learning curve. And these are the first steps to UX success. So one step, and this is just a slide, I will not go into detail here. One step is understand the architecture of OpenUI. So here's the solution to the acronyms. PR is a physical renderer, PM is a presentation model. So many developers, me included, started writing, well, figuring out what physical renderers are, what presentation models are, and writing your custom versions of those and accomplishing certain things. And of course, you can go far with that technique, but sometimes far is not far enough. So this is how far you can go and maybe even further. So I have picked 4 examples that I could find on the public internet. So if you are working for a company that is mentioned here, well done, you're among the best. And so in the recent Siebel Friday, Endo IT showed their prowess in OpenUI UX customization for A1 Croatia for a project. And of course, that is very impressive visually and technically. Box Fusion Consulting, of course, we have to mention here, has a lot of projects under the belt, which they have publicly described on their website. You will find the links to all these websites in the description. So I give full credit to those companies for those screenshots. And as you can see, the real world applications that have been modified, so all of this is Siebel OpenUI, where you can see that a lot of visuals have been added, despite the usual dreary form and list applets. And you still recognize some forms and lists when they are necessary. But you also see aggregations, charting, and highlights, data highlights, or icons that represent different states of data. And that, of course, is a very visual approach and is the opposite of what standard Siebel is. And that's very interesting that you go from one extreme, let's say very dry data presentation, forms and lists, to a very colorful and, of course, exciting presentation. And of course, it shouldn't be exciting every day. It gets exhausting. But the end users, obviously, these are big UX projects, and the end users wanted something like this, and they needed something like this to improve their processes. Okay, how do you get there? So here is a pyramid, and actually on the top of the pyramid, there's the least amount of money spent. So you have to read it that way. So you can start with simple CSS overrides with a bit of watching tutorials on YouTube, for example, and then you can do some CSS overrides with a custom logo or even a custom scheme or a custom theme with separate style for applets, etc. And that is still a low-cost scenario, but doesn't get you very far in terms of UX. Then we have the applet UX. So applet UX means you define with physical renderers the behavior of form and list applets or other applets, enhance them. Next level would be, for example, responsive UX. So you cater for mobile devices, the same application rendering differently on a tablet, a smartphone, or when printed, depending on the media and device. And then, of course, you enter the realm of highly skilled, highly qualified work, including dashboarding, fetching data through REST APIs in parallel. Again, EndoIT has done a great presentation there. Or even, and of course, not just starting here, but maybe earlier, using third-party libraries, taking the learning curve to learn the third-party library, learn how to use it for maps, charts, timelines, you name it, or even entire component design libraries. Or let's say the highest degree that, according to the poll that we have seen, many projects go down into is a complete UX re-implementation, so where you don't see anything of the original Siebel OpenUI. It's behind the scenes, behind the curtain, so to speak, and the front stage is taken by content rendered with the help of React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, just to mention a few famous libraries or frameworks, if you will. So what considerations would you have when you start working with OpenUI and start customizing the UX? So one question would be, do you stay desktop only? So do you have the biggest screen estate possible, large monitors in laptops or offices, large resolution, or do you need to support small screens or both? And both, of course, is the biggest challenge here. Go from desktop to a smartphone. Just hold your phone against your monitor and you see what I mean. And by the way, that was something I had to tell managers in one project. Could you please hold your phone next to your monitor and see the difference in size and imagine that we cannot just put all of the data on the phone? Yes, please. Okay. That's important in the first kickoff meeting to manage expectations. Do you want to stay vanilla? That means, do you want to have any portions of the standard Siebel OpenUI still recognizable, or do you want a full redesign? Of course, your mileage and cost will vary. Do you require UX workshops? The answer is yes, you do. Don't go without asking your end user groups what's the best UX for them and making up prototypes in Figma, etc. It's state of the art, and we're talking about art of the possible, and it's impossible to do a real UX redesign without workshops. Then it's implementation time. So what skills do you have already in-house? You might have some Siebel developers who are proficient in OpenUI, CSS, JavaScript, HTML, or you might have not. You might have to either skill up or purchase these resources. Also, what skills do they have in terms of third-party libraries or frameworks? Is it a React? Is React the favorite tool, or is Vue the favorite framework? And you would just go with whatever, let's say, developer-driven development, because if the developer knows React, they will use it. Do you need a web designer? Yes, you need a web designer, please. Do we need external resources or integrators? Probably yes, if you can't provide all of the resources in-house, and that's most probably in a Siebel project. Do you build on top of OpenUI, or do you create a custom app with REST? It's a completely different ballpark, of course. If you go mobile, what devices and browsers do you support? Do you support any device, even down to, let's say, the foldable phones, which pose a separate challenge there with the UX? What bandwidth do you support? Are you in a country or countries with no problem bandwidth on mobile, or problematic bandwidth, to say the least? Should we pair Siebel developers with non-Siebel web developers and designers? Yes, you should do that. So my experience is, if there's just Siebel developers, their mindset is just too narrow on Siebel, and they have typically no or very few skills in modern web design. And of course, a web designer has never heard of Siebel before, so it's very unwise to use either group exclusively. So put them together and you will see a burst of creativity and quality. Okay, what's the path here? So here you see 3 different developer groups. You see the upskilled Siebel developer. So what does it mean, upskilled Siebel developer? That means the developer has, of course, proficiency in classic Siebel development. That is understanding business object, business components, integration objects, applet views, you name it. The Siebel developer, well, a Siebel developer who is self-taught or educated in basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript can already start working in OpenUI, but still they don't understand the OpenUI API. So that is, of course, mandatory. That's where the Siebel Hub learning experience comes in. Many people start with learning jQuery because it's included in OpenUI. It's not mandatory to learn it, but it couldn't hurt for, let's say, simple things. And then, of course, it's taking the time, having the time, getting funding to learn third-party libraries and frameworks, the likes of Vue, React, but also Bootstrap or Shoelace. So it could be simple libraries, it could be complex frameworks. And that is what I would call, with those skills, I would call a Siebel developer an upskilled Siebel developer ready to participate successfully in an OpenUI or OpenUX project. Now, with knowledge about third-party libraries, you also enter the realm of web design, and knowing about those libraries, modern web design, UX principles, or graphic design. Let's say you have certain knowledge about typography, fonts, icons. So you can create beautiful apps and maintain them professionally. That's the job of a web designer. And a Siebel developer is rarely the same person. So you have to either train those people or get those people into your project. And the same is true for web developers, who overlap a little bit with web designers, but usually focus on the front-end technologies. And that includes graphic design, modern HTML. So there's an overlap here, definitely. modern day JavaScript, web components, and advanced. They can work with advanced JavaScript frameworks and stay current and fluent in, well, not all of them, of course, but one of them at least, or maybe two of them. And that is the web developer group. So best to have at least those three groups of people. If you have it, if you are one person who can check all these boxes, well done. You really have a good career ahead of you. And let's put this into perspective of, as an organization, as a manager wanting to provide the best UX with maybe your upgraded Siebel environment to the end users. Then you could start here. You decide, okay, we don't invest any money. We just go with the Siebel developers we have. And those Siebel developers, they are really good. And so they can do simple CSS. They write haphazard JavaScript with the risk of high technical debt. And the application still looks mostly like standard Siebel. So there are only a few changes here and there. So it looks like a hybrid of something weird and something standard. And that is the low-cost approach, and nobody's really happy with that. So we would have to go at least with number 2. That is, train your Siebel developers, especially in OpenUI and web technologies. So then you can reach a point where you have a custom theme, consistent app design, or even responsiveness across devices. You have organized JavaScript using third-party libraries where necessary. And most of the application, or even the entire application, now has custom UI or custom UX. So it's professionally built with, let's say, Siebel developers who have been upskilled. And that's, of course, within the reach of the possible. And number 3 is actually do number 2, plus engage highly skilled web UX designers, or engage with consultancies such as the ones we mentioned, who can give you professional guidance through UX workshops, modern web design principles, who can tackle all the challenges of mobility, data visualization, process-based UX, and create a complete UI or UX redesign with modern JavaScript frameworks. That's, of course, the highest cost, but also you get the most out of it. So in the middle here is the upskilled Siebel developer who can take part in, well, both sides, either a type 2 or type 3 project. We talked a lot about technical skills. Let's talk about non-technical skills. So is it wise to add more developers if your project goes down the drain? That's unwise, of course. Adding more resources always prolongs the project, makes it more complex. It will not yield a better or faster project if you just panic and add more developers. It's important to include resources from the start with soft skills, let's say business process analysis. You need to understand the business process, otherwise you cannot go into UX design or UX workshops. Proficiency with modern design systems is very desirable because then the project will have a professional touch from day one. And consider locale-specific skills such as right-to-left UI in Arabic countries. And of course, let's not forget the users. We have all the techies and business analysts and designers, but the users subsequently have to use and endure the UX. And hopefully they are happy with it. And they might not be happy from day one, might require some adoption management or training. So you need resources to do that as well. And another perspective on this is what type of application do we want? So, and I'm starting out here with a few classic Siebel types. So the desktop application out of the box with minimal customization. Customization refers to OpenUI. So you do a bit here and there, so type 2 customizations, and that would work on big screen devices. So that includes tablets, desktops and tablets, and it would be mostly using the existing jQuery and OpenUI libraries that you find with OpenUI, maybe integrating some library. So one of the pros is you have a lot of space, large screen estate. The Siebel CRM is more or less classic, so easy to learn. And desktop integration, one of the features with DISA is out of the box. Well, you don't have to reinvent wheels. So the next option you could opt for is go mobile. So you could go for the standard mobility of Siebel with supporting tablets and phones, using the same technologies, OpenUI and jQuery, classic Siebel OpenUI. And with out of the box, there's no customization required, but of course you can. There's even a container app, and there's disconnected mode. So a lot of pros. Let's look at the cons a little bit. Even Siebel mobile applications, many people falsely think that the Siebel mobile application is an app that you install on the phone. Well, there is an app, but it's a container for a browser. So you still have the Siebel web application, and that downloads 8 to 9 megabytes of JavaScript and style sheets and images from the web server. Of course, you could say it's downloading only once because it's then cached, but imagine transferring 9 megabytes onto a phone with a low bandwidth. So then this is what we mean by large footprint. And to be honest, any OpenUI-based solution has this large footprint because unfortunately we cannot deactivate the standard manifest. We cannot get rid of some libraries. So there are some strategies you can find there. For example, removing content from those libraries, but that is of course a high risk. And now the next level is an OpenUI custom web app, which is a desktop or mobile app still using traditional techniques, OpenUI, jQuery, and definitely some libraries you find. So your level of freedom goes up, anything goes. You have a fully tailored UX, still traditional OpenUI. So very suitable for the upskilled Siebel developer. Effort is rising, of course, and there's a risk of scope creep. So because anything goes, people think that anything goes, but that costs, and we still have that large footprint. And now the final stage you can reach is the JavaScript framework-driven complete redesign with OpenUI in the background and modern JavaScript frameworks, and maybe something called Nexus Bridge. Coming up in a moment what that is. So you have very good options for design, future-proof, hopefully UX. It's typically component-based and high acceptance among the developers. But you need skilled developers. You need to understand that you're rebuilding the entire UX. It's not classic Siebel UI anymore. And the footprint is still large because you have to load all of Siebel and then something on top. So to reduce that footprint, the only option currently is to create your own, let's call it digital app, using entirely different technologies like the Siebel REST API and your framework of choice. So Siebel becomes a backend using the inbound REST API. You must design from ground up, which is a pro, but you must recreate all Siebel functionality, which is a big con. But the small footprint, well, that's not a con actually. It should be a pro. The small footprint is, of course, something good here. Okay, so lots of things to think about, and to understand what's your state of the project, which way did you travel. So we talked a lot about frameworks, and modern front-end frameworks like Vue.js, etc. They can do a lot of good if the developers are really skilled, and there's a high learning curve. Of course, and not every Siebel developer will become a web developer. And web developers usually will never become Siebel developers. So both have a learning curve as you strive to build a team of both classic modern web developers and experienced Siebel developers. So here I'm listing in this discussion library versus framework. It's not really versus. You can choose whatever works best for you. But a few examples. jQuery and D3, for example, are used with Siebel. So modern Siebel OpenUI uses these two libraries, so they are readily available. But it really is no big effort to download a library, a collection of JavaScript functions, literally, and include it in Siebel. Names used in the past have been Mithril, Shoelace, Chart.js, or even Nexus Bridge from Ideaport Riga. They're often combined and easily replaceable. So if you want to have a different style of date picker, you choose a different library. And of course, you have to integrate that. It's different with a JavaScript framework where you have all the modern aspects of application design, often based loosely on model view controller principles. So you have control flow, etc., which you can ignore largely with Siebel because Siebel has its own control flow. No, you can drill down, you can go to views. And examples, of course, are Angular, React, Vue, or Svelte, or others. And among other things, they support modern DevOps principles like NPM or Webpack. And often you find the support in the community by dozens of, for example, extensions for Visual Studio Code. So that is characteristic for a full framework. So you have a full developer community behind it. Under the hood is still JavaScript or sometimes TypeScript, but often the code is compiled or transpiled into something completely different than what you write initially. Okay, so we have reached the stage where we talk about the do's and don'ts in your Open UI and UX project. Of course, no-brainers, and you would agree to everything, I guess. Start small, pilot early, iterate fast. Yeah. So that, of course, means you go agile and you focus on the most important things first, and you don't accept any scope creep. You need to conduct UX workshops with your end users, manage expectations, manage adoptions, tell them that it's a small screen they will have if you have a mobile project, even if they don't believe it, and put together a team of web developers, web designers, and Siebel developers. So get the best team for the job. Design for performance. I would say design for performance first and ease of use first. So the whole user experience is based on those two things. If it doesn't perform, the users will not accept it. If they see a blank screen for 10 seconds after launching, that is not acceptable in today's modern UX world. You have to tune the application so that it fulfills those measures. And then, of course, if it's performant, it must be easy to use. Not just pretty on the eye, it must do the job. So that is a hard design. It's not done in one iteration usually. And of course, don't reinvent any wheels. You don't have to write the chart library because there are like hundreds of them. As one example. Don't ignore performance issues early on. It could be the database, could be the browser, could be the network. Remember mobile bandwidth. So don't ignore that. Work on it first thing. And especially if you're using mobile devices, never forget or ignore the pleas of the developers to test it on the real physical device. It's a big difference if you just use those browser emulators. It's not the real mobile network. It's not the real device. You have to touch the phone with your fingers and then see if it works. And you have to go outside of the office Wi-Fi, go to the real network, maybe go on a train and test that under real conditions. So don't forget to test on real devices. Okay, a lot of things to do on your path to modern Siebel UX. First is train the Siebel developers and the non-Siebel developers. The Siebel developers must learn OpenUI and web principles. The non-Siebel developers must learn some Siebel basics to be on the same level, at least from an understanding. If you talk about business components and applets, everybody should understand what you mean. And this is where the Siebel Hub comes in, with modern, always up-to-date training for those two groups of users or developers. The whole project team must understand UX requirements. You need to engage external resources if necessary, conduct UX workshops, organize them, organize end-user training, make sure you have that pilot, prototype, fast iteration set up, and ongoing user adoption is key. Monitoring the application, monitoring performance, monitoring usage patterns, and then, of course, you go back and implement. A few resources I would like to list here that help you understand OpenUI. So the first resource I mentioned here is Siebel to Phone. It's an open source project that I did a while ago. The goal is to take any Siebel desktop application with respect to list and form applets and transform it or convert it into a fully responsive UX so that the same application can work on smaller screens, including phones. So hence Siebel to Phone. It's of course an educational demo. You'll find a lot of code there, but of course that code is not supposed to run on your production environment. Contact me if you're interested in a demo. Happy to walk you through. And I'm also curating a sample collection for more technical OpenUI demos, the art of the possible, let's say, in the background with using the REST API or fetching stuff from the Siebel servers, and that is called devpops. And if you follow the Siebel Hub or the YouTube channel, you will certainly have heard about devpops. It's based on OpenUI, so the code is definitely using OpenUI principles. And I mentioned Nexus Bridge from Ideaport Riga, which was made publicly available in 2019. And it's in essence a JavaScript library that wraps the presentation model layer and makes it easier or even possible for web developers that have not much inclination with Siebel to use the modern framework of choice like Vue or React to re-render, redesign the user experience. So it runs on top of Siebel OpenUI, but you can then have an elevated level of freedom, so to speak. So full applause to Ideaport Riga for making this available for free on GitHub and also for maintaining it over the years and even going as far as getting it reviewed and approved by Oracle, albeit not supported by Oracle support. So you have to understand that. Another resource would be the videos I publish frequently on the Siebel Hub YouTube channel. You find a link in the description here, and if you watch the replay, then you are on YouTube already. So find the OpenUI playlist, for example, with a lot of, well, examples how to use OpenUI. And that brings us full circle to the Siebel Hub learning experience, I mentioned that we have two trainings, as OpenUI Basics and Professional. So entry, beginner level, and advanced level training for Siebel OpenUI. It's available as video and live training. And as a special treat for our audience here, you get a promotion code GoSiebel23, and you get 50% off the list price of any of those two trainings. So don't waste that code.